Hey folks, Pat that Halloween movie collector. I'm back with another top 10 album list. This time we're doing 1981. A lot of great albums in 81. 80 so far, I was blown away how many great albums there were in 1980. I didn't really realize it until I started digging into it. Same thing here in 81. Probably more in 80, but this is going to be a little bit more straightforward, like metal list from what I'm seeing from what I put down on my top 10. So it's not going to be as eclectic as the rest of the list, but there's a little one curveball at number 10, and the rest are pretty much all in the hard rock and metal lane. So stay tuned and find out. But of course, as usual, there was a lot I had to leave off the table because it only fit 10 in the top 10. And there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to put on this list. So there's a lot of honorable mentions, and here they are. Yes, another stellar list of honorable mentions that I couldn't fit in my top 10. Great albums nonetheless, just couldn't do it. So here we go. Let's start us off with my number 10. So number 10 is from a band that a lot of people may not know. This is a band I love from my punk rock skater days. And this was their first release back in 1981. And of course, it's so dark that there's no actual release date, but it did come out in 81. Band is called TSOL, and the album is Dance With Me. So if any of you guys ever heard of TSOL, True Sounds of Liberty, they started out as a real, and they've since evolved back into like a real punk rock skate band. And their first release was very, very cool with Jack Grisham, their first singer. And it's very skate rockish stuff. It's very, it's punk rock stuff. And if you've ever heard of them, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's some great songs on here, like obviously Dance With Me. There's Code Blue, Silent Scream, Funeral March. There's a lot of some satirical stuff on here too, because a lot of punk rock stuff tends to be satirical, especially the stuff coming out of L.A. These guys were out of Orange County. And eventually TSOL morphed into, well, TSOL does stand for True Sounds of Liberty. That's it's just their initials. Later it did morph into more of a mainstream band, which you're going to see as we move towards the mid-'80s with their other singer Joe Wood. And if you guys are Guns N' Roses fans, you can just see right Steve Nadler's shirt, and I think it was it's a Sweet Child of Mine video. He's wearing a TSOL shirt because they were big fans of TSOL at the time. The later version with Joe Wood, but this is like straightforward, like skater music, and I just love it. I love all incarnations of TSOL. They've since reverted back to this version because Joe Wood has been out of the band for many, many years. He does his own thing, and I've seen him. He's awesome. And Jack Grisham, the original singer, has been back for many years, and I've seen him several times. Turned my son into a TSOL fan, so if you've heard of TSOL, you know where I'm coming from. Love those guys, and this is their debut album, my number 10. Okay, my number 9, released on November 10th of 1981. The debut album from this band, Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love. Speaking of in the punk vein, the first album was bordering the same thing. It was sort of like punk infused, rock. It was very stripped down, very 3-chord, very, I just love the production. It's just very raw. It doesn't have a lot of delay or reverb on it. It's just very in your face. And I just love this. It's still my favorite to this day, but still my favorite Motley Crue album. You got songs like Live Wire on there, Too Fast for Love, Piece of Your Action. It's just stripped down and dirty. This was like a band that was just wanted to make it on the Sunset Strip, because we're going to see a lot of the bands, because this is the era of the bands that were all lined up on the Sunset Strip trying to play all those clubs back in the day, trying to get signed. Just go watch The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, and you can see how that panned out. But there's some real great down and dirty, just great songs on here. A lot of you, if you fans of the cowbell, there's a lot of cowbell on this album. Shout out to Tommy Lee. But this is my favorite album, and this is a stellar kick in the face for a debut album. All right, my number 8, released on July 8th, 1981. I don't know. This is bordering on my favorite album from these guys, but Def Leppard, High and Dry, the album that first introduced me to Def Leppard back in the day. because started hearing Bringing On the Heartbreak, and that was the big tune before they came out with Pyromania. Love High and Dry, the title song on here. Let It Go, You Got Me Running. This is a great, straightforward rockin' album. I mean, just song after song here. It just kicks, and it's leading up to what they would eventually become. Albeit, I do like their earlier releases more so because they became a little bit more polished, a little bit more poppy. I always like Def Leppard. I'm not going to say I don't like their later albums. But the first few albums, like On Through the Night, High and Dry, Pyromania, are just some of my favorite albums. And High and Dry, kicks ass. This is a great album. Right, my number 7, released on February 2nd, 1981. The sophomore release from this band, Iron Maiden Killers. Professed my love of the first 2 Iron Maiden albums on my last ranking, 1980, with the release of their debut album, Iron Maiden. I love the Paul Di'Anno albums. Love his voice. They're still my favorite albums. Love Bruce Dickinson. Don't anybody yell at me. Love what he brought to the band. But I just love these first 2 albums with Paul Di'Anno. You have Killers on here, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Genghis Khan. Just some great songs on here, and would love to have seen where it would have gone a little bit further with Paul Di'Anno. I understand all the turmoil and bullshit that went on behind the scenes, so he had to be shown the door. I totally get that. But it's a shame. It would have been nice to see where it could have gone. And his solo band, Di'Anno, years ago, and the other shit he did, great voice. And like I said in the last video, rest in peace, because we just recently lost him. But some great, Wrathchild, Killers. This album's just chock full of Maiden classics that I just love to listen to. These first 2 albums, I can just listen to them back to back all the time. My number 6, released on February 21st, 1981. This is my introduction to this band. Judas Priest, Point of Entry. Yeah, first discovered them. I want to say, I think it was the Heading Out to the Highway video was when I first saw them on MTV. I hadn't really listened to them before. And that's, of course, it's on this, and Desert Plains is on here, Solar Angels. This is a great album. I mean, I love a lot of the Priest stuff before they got too heavy. I like the heavy stuff, don't get me wrong, but I do like all this stuff before Painkiller, more so than the stuff beyond that, because this stuff was just some great stripped down metal, and it just kicked you right in the face. This was probably before they really got too, that's not true, because they're going to get a little bit more leather and chains going forward from here, but this was just when they were just basically a straightforward hard rock band on the verge of like real heavy metal. And this one always seems to fly under the radar, because it's like between everything. Great songs like Solar Angels. Go back and check this album out, because I think it just gets lost in the mix with like British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith and Painkiller. But this one's one you got to go back and revisit. My number 5, released on June 22nd, 1981, from one of my favorite bands, Blue Oyster Cult, Fire of Unknown Origin. Now, if you've watched these, I'm a big Blue Oyster Cult fan, one of my top 3 bands of all time. And this album is just a stellar release. Of course, it's overshadowed by one of their bigger hits, Burning for You, is on here, but there's so much other stuff on here. Veteran of the Psychic Wars, Joan Crawford. Just go here and check it out. If you've never listened to BOC outside of the so-called hits that are out there that they play all the time, go do a deep dive into Blue Oyster Cult, because be surprised at some of the great stuff you're going to hear. Don't turn your back. Veteran of the Psychic Wars. There's some really cool, like, anthemic and deep and like mystical shit that they do on all their albums, and this has just got some great stuff on it. So yeah, if you've never checked it out, beyond Burning for You, go check out Fire of Unknown Origin. Number 4, released on November 20th, 1981, AC/DC, For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. This album, talk about a great follow-up to, you have an album like Back in Black, that's tough to follow up. It was a big hit back in the day. Of course, it's gargantuan now. But this was a great follow-up, because there's times where I go back and forth which one I like better. I love For Those About to Rock. And the funny story is, I remember my brother going to see this tour. I didn't get to see it because I was too young at the time. And I said, just bring me back something from, and he brought me back the tour program, and it was all For Those About to Rock. And I didn't even know the new album came out, because this was before social media, so I didn't know any of this shit. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh my God, this is all different. And it had all the names of the songs on the tour program, so I had to run out and get the album. And For Those About to Rock is just so much great stuff on here. It's like a perfect the follow-up to Back in Black. I Put the Finger on You, Inject the Venom, Evil Walks Behind You. I mean, there's so many other great songs on here that they should play more often, because all they have to play off this album is For Those About to Rock. And I get it, because they have to play the popular songs, but you're an AC/DC fan, I'm preaching to the choir. You know how much great stuff is on this album. The production quality is great. You still got Mutt Lange there. And this is all part of what I call like the trilogy of album covers that all look the same. They just a little different, like, Back in Black, and then For Those About to Rock, and then you got Flick of the Switch coming up. They all sort of look a little bit the same. It's like the trilogy of AC/DC covers that matched. But yeah, For Those About to Rock, awesome album. Number 3, released on November 4th of 1981, sophomore effort of Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio, Mob Rules. Mob Rules. Can't say enough about this album. And I love these two albums with Dio. I mean, I know they did Humanizer later, and they came out with Heaven and Hell albums, but these first two albums with Dio are just classics. It just took Black Sabbath in a different direction. They just sounded so much different, much more. I mean, polished isn't a bad word, but like a much more polished metal band. With Ozzy, they were just like down and dirty, which I'm not knocking, because I love all the Sabbath Ozzy stuff. It's my favorite. But it just sounded so much different. It was just a little more polished, a little bit more professional, if that sounds I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass, but just professing my love for this album. From Mob Rules, Country Girl, Sign of the Southern Cross, Voodoo, just so many great songs on here. And to me, every time I listen to these first, it just takes me right back to the early 80s. Because I just remember getting these. And it's another thing where I didn't know. I remember getting, was it either Cream Magazine or Circus? And open it up and seeing a picture of Ronnie James Dio, and it's saying, Ronnie James Dio, singer for Black Sabbath. I'm like, you didn't know back in the day a lot of that stuff. You didn't catch all that shit that quick. Especially, I was young at the time, so I didn't see all that stuff. But every time I'd pick up like a music magazine, I had no idea that, I knew that Ozzy was out of Sabbath. Of course, at the time I thought he left. You don't know all the shit, how they got rid of him. Because what do you call it? Blizzard of Oz had come out, and my brother and I had gotten it. And we loved it. So I knew that was there, but I had no idea that Ronnie James Dio, the guy who was singing with Rainbow, was singing for Sabbath. So it was a much different time back then, especially for all the folks that know. If you were a little bit older and you had the wherewithal and the means to go buy all the magazines and stay on top of things, when you were younger, it was always harder. I just remember opening it up and seeing him, and I'm like, he's singing for Black Sabbath? That's fucked up. But hey, and I love it. It was a perfect addition, in my opinion. All right, number 2, released on April 29th, 1981, my favorite album from this band. I was waiting for this to come up. Van Halen, Fair Warning. Fair Warning is the epitome of like chunk brown sound. Everything on here is dark and menacing, and just the sound on this album that Eddie got is just incredible. And I've been trying to replicate it forever. Even as far as, if you look at my Line 6 amplifier, there's a setting called the brown sound. This is to replicate that sound. And this has so many great classic Van Halen songs from Mean Street, So This Is Love, Unchained, I Don't Want to Hear About It Later. There's so much great stuff on here. It sounds chock full of Van Halen classics. They were just like firing on all cylinders at this point. And it's great because a lot of their, like I said, like when I talked about Women and Children First, the Van Halen albums never sounded the same. They always had different stuff on it. They really did. And like, Women and Children First was balls to the wall, like drinking and drink some whiskey and let's party and rock and roll. And this was much more experimental and dark. And then, of course, where we're going to go with Diver Down, which is a little bit of a mishmash there because there's a lot of covers on that album. It's not too much shit on that album, but I still like it. There's some good stuff on it. We'll worry about it when we get there. But this album, still to this day, my favorite Van Halen album. And my number 1, released on November 7th, 1981. Sure, just like the last top 10, you were waiting for this one to appear. Ozzy Osbourne, Diary of a Madman. We fell in love with Blizzard of Oz, fell in love with Randy Rhoads, just fell in love with the entire band. Blizzard of Oz band, from Lee Kerslake, Bob Daisley. And then here you go. I remember getting this and looking at it. I'm like, wow, That's not the same guys from the first album. Unbeknownst to me, you didn't know all the turmoil back then, how they played on the album, but Ozzy fired them, just kept Randy, and then you had Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge in there, which was all well and good, but they didn't play on the album. But the songs on Diary, like I said, God, if Randy had lived, could you imagine the shit we would have got? Because there's so much great stuff on Diary of a Madman, from Diary of a Madman to Over the Mountain. Sado, Believer, Tonight, You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. This is just stocked with every song on the 2 albums that Randy released with Ozzy. Every song is just amazing, and would love to have seen what could have been. And still to this day, listen to this album all the time. I do listen to Tribute more than anything because it's a mishmash of both, and I love the live versions, like I mentioned on the last video. But my number one of that year, Ozzy Osbourne, Diary of a Madman. There you have it. Those are my top 10, my favorite albums from 1981. Do me a favor in the comments below. Give me your top 10 albums of 1981. Let me know. Let me know some honorable mentions. Let me know a couple albums that's like, oh, Pat, did you like this? Because you didn't have it on your list. Throw it on there. Because I get the same shit every time I do these lists. Oh, you forgot this. This is better than that. Why don't you have this? This is all subjective. Throw something out there that I might have missed and say, hey, Pat, do you like this? I didn't forget anything. Everything is the way it is because I go through what I own. If I don't own it, then I don't listen to it. That's the way I look at it. So throw a list in there. Let me know some of your top 10 from 1981. Maybe there is something I did forget. I was like, oh shit, maybe I should have put that on my list. Maybe, or at least my honorable mentions. But do me a favor. Hit that like button while you're doing it. And let's bring some other people in here that want to do some more top 10s. So just like to talk music and just like to bullshit. It helps them find this channel. I'll probably do 82 in a week or so. I wouldn't expect to do this one as fast as I did, but I as you can tell, I've been home sick, so I've been trying to bang out a lot of stuff because I got time to kill and I'm bored as shit. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Don't cost nothing. And come back for some more top 10s. We're going to do some more top 10s. Well, eventually, when we go through all the different decades, we'll do some top 10 music things and some other stuff. And there's always something going on here, talking about music or movies or whatever. There's all sorts of shit on this channel. Just jump around and you're bound to step in some shit. So until then, like, comment, subscribe, all that bullshit. And I'll see you for 1982. Later.